Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, please click on like and subscribe. If you've been here before, welcome back. Today we're going to be building a 3-step stool. Now I've done a couple of these in the past out of walnut cherry. I'm going to do one out of pine to see how it holds up, how well it goes together. This is store-bought pine. This is off the shelf. You can buy this at your box store. These are listed as a 1x10x8. They're actually 3/4 by 9¼ by 8 foot long. So here's my cut list. If you want, take a minute, pause on here, get the numbers up there if you need them. I will basically be telling you what each one of the cuts are as I cut them, but since I'm not cutting them in the exact order, it may confuse you a little bit, but eventually we're going to get down to all of those parts that are listed on there. Now I will do a separate video on how to do the stairs. Basically you're creating a stair runner. I'll do a separate video on how to do that. I've got one made out since I make this stool quite regularly. I made a template for it. If you're going to make multiples of these, I suggest you do the same thing. You make a template, it's a whole lot easier than trying to do the measurements every time. The measurements are hard to do once you learn how to do them, but if you're going to cut the same thing every time, it's easier just to have a template thrown on top of your wood. So your cut list doesn't have to be done exactly like it is on the list here. Depending on your wood and how much you've got available, if you're making multiples of these, if you use scrap wood a lot, or if you're just trying to make this one project, you can draw this out on your board before you start cutting it, so you can draw each individual piece out on the board and use as little scrap as you need to. In my case, I'm just going to kind of cut it as I go because I've cut this out several times to make the three-tier stool, so I kind of know what I'm going to get out of each board. But if you had to, you could draw this out on the wood, cut the pieces as needed to save as much lumber as possible. Now I'm going to cut these a little bit longer than what I need. These are going to be my side pieces. I want to leave enough room that I can cut a 5-degree slope or a 5-degree angle at the top and the bottom. I want it to be 23 from long end to long end. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this at 24 inches just to make sure that I've got enough room to do that. I'm not going to have enough scrap wood to worry about. There'll be a little bit left over than I want to, but at least we're going to get close enough that we can get all our 5-degree slopes in there. Now something else, these are 1 3/4 inches wide. This board only finishes out to 9 1/4 inches. So I'm going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 boards out of this. That's my 4 legs. So normally a 10-inch wide board finished from Lowe's comes out to 9½ inches. This one's actually 9 1/4 inches. I'm going to, I normally make my tops 9½ inches wide by 15½ inches. I'm going to just knock it down 1/4 inch because it's only 1/4 inch off and it's my top piece, so it's not going to matter overall. Again, make this judgment on yours. You can make it smaller, make it bigger, but I'm going to go ahead and cut this right where it needs to be. A lot of times on these, if you see me using raw wood, I leave them longer because if there's a split or something in here, or if I need to plane something down to get it level, it's can be a problem. But since we're already pre-cut, our sides are nice and smooth, I'm gonna go ahead and cut this right at 15 1/4, and it's already 9 1/4 inches wide, and that piece will be done. Next thing I need is my 2 steps, which are 12 inches wide. Again, our wood's finished, so I'm just gonna cut these right at 12 inches. I'm gonna cut the first one, and then overlap the 2 pieces so they're both exactly the same width or same length. 12. And I'm just stacking the first one on the second one so they're exactly the same. Now, when you're doing this, we want our grain structure, as I got my plywood, going downward here. Now, that would mean I either need to buy a 16-inch wide piece of wood, glue it together and join it, or I can go ahead and cut it at an angle. Now this changes our wood grain to left to right instead of up and down. That's going to create more flex in there. And if it were shorter pieces, I'm worried about it bowing, but since we're going to put supports in there, I'm not worried about it bowing. The only thing you're going to lose is a little bit of strength by doing it that way. Now this piece is more of a decorational piece, or it's a lightweight stool for a smaller person. 100 pounds, 150 pounds, somewhere in there. Now it's probably going to hold more weight, but we're designing this for a smaller person. If I was doing this for a bigger person, first of all, I would be using a hardwood, not a softwood. And I would also be making my grain structure go this way. So again, if you're building this for a heavier person, make sure your grain goes this way. Take 2 pieces of wood if you have to, butt them together, glue them up, and then cut it. So these are my part H. I'm going to make these 6 inches wide. I normally make them 5 3/4. So I've got my big parts cut. I'm going to start cutting my smaller pieces now. So I've got 2 pieces left over off those stairs. I'm going to make 2 of the E's out of these 2 smaller pieces now. So these will be 9½ by 1 3/4. Now again, I'm bouncing around my cut list a little here, but I'm trying to save wood if I can. So I'm going to go ahead and cut my 24-inch sections, and I should have one extra 24-inch board out of here, which I'm going to make either my F's or my other two E's out of there. And there's my extra piece, and as you can see, it just barely fits through the saw, which is perfect. So I'm going to use this to make my other two E's. I'm just going to use the boards I have. I'm going to cut them, and then I'm going to cut all four of them at the same time. I'm just barely nipping the tips off of these. I'll end up with 9.5 inches, but they'll all be perfectly even. I'm going to cut me a 12.5 inch piece and cut the 1 3/4 inches out of those. I'm using a new piece of wood here, or an extra piece of wood. And again, I'm going to have one strip left over when I get done. I'm going to take that one strip that's left over and we'll make either A's or B's out of them. The A is 4.5 from long point to long point. The B is 7.5 from long point to long point. So I've got my miter saw set to 5 degrees here, and I'm going to cut off one end of the board that I've got. Then I'm going to flip it over and we're going to make the cut go in the opposite way. So if you set your saw to go out to in, flip your board straight over like I just did. So you're going from there. So both cuts are coming inward together. Again, if you're making the A's, it's 4.5 inches. If you're making your B's, it's 7.5 inches. And you end up with 2 each of those. So I'll grab my last piece of wood that I had left over there. I'm cutting this to 8 inches because these are going to be 7.5 inches for my B cut. I left my piece that I had left over. I didn't slice it down to 1 3/4. So basically we're going to have 7.5 by 1 3/4 with a 5 degree slope on it, both sloping inward. So now I've got my 2 A's cut, my 2 B's cut, my 2 C's, 2 D's, my E's, my F's. My G is my rod. Now the G, I have a bunch of dowel rods. I make these myself. I've got a couple of videos showing you how to do these. If you don't want to make your own, you can pick these up over at Lowe's. Pick up either a 7/8 inch or a 1 inch. This is poplar, even though I'm using pine. I want to make sure I use something a little bit harder since this is going to support the weight. You can use oak if you wanted to. You can use pine again if you're not putting a lot of weight on there. But this is going to help support it, and we're going to countersink these into the side supports to help hold more weight also. I'm going to cut this to 13.5 inches. Since my step is 12 inches, I need clearance for that. So I've got a 1/2 inch clearance, makes it 12.5, and I need to add 1 inch so I can countersink these 1/2 inch into each side rail. As you can see, there's my scrap wood out of my first board. I've got about 5 foot left of the second board. So here are my legs. These are my 24 inch by 1 3/4 inch cuts. I'm going to take these and I'm going to tape them together. If you watch my other videos, you've seen me do this before. You don't have to do this. I just prefer to do this. It keeps my legs straighter. I hate fixing wobbly legs and trying to figure out which one's high, which one's low. This has saved me a lot of time. Again, they're not always 100% perfect. I still have to make some corrections here and there sometimes. But this definitely helps me keep my legs a lot straighter on most of my projects. So I tape all these together and we're going to make our 5 degree cuts at one time on all 4 boards. Now these are going to go the same direction since we're sloping inward. We don't want to flip the board over. We just want to cut our 5 degrees off one end, slide them all the way down, and again 23.25 inches from long point to long point. Make sure you take the time to drop a comment down below. Make sure you smash that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you feel like it, you can always take the time and hit the super thanks down below. I would appreciate it. So we're on to our stair runner over here. So I've got my 2 boards laid together. I'm going to do the same thing I did with my legs. I'm going to tape these 2 pieces together. I'm going to stencil my runner out on there, and I'm going to cut them both at the same time. That'll keep my cut straight on both sides, and again, it'll keep me from having one leg wobbly, one leg shorter or further off than the other one. If there's a wobble at the end, that's because when I assembled it, I did something wrong. And we'll go over some steps to make sure you don't do that. I have done that before. It's not hard to do. If you're not square when you put this thing together, you can have one leg easily not touching the floor, or the stairs don't touch the floor properly when you fold it down. Now when you cut this out, you can use any method you want to. You can use a chop saw, you can use a skill saw, you can use a bandsaw, jigsaw, whatever you want to get these pieces cut out. I cut them different. It seems like every single time I cut them. I like to use my miter saw because that keeps my angles straight on a couple places. Like the bottom of my foot and the top I know are 90 degree angles. So even if my pencil's off a little bit or my stencil's getting a little bit worn out, I still know that I've got 90 degrees on the angles I need them at, and it keeps my other cuts nice and straight. After you do that, my bandsaw's not really set up to cut softwood. It kind of did a little bit of extra damage on there, but I can sand it out. Just make sure you sand out any imperfections in there where your stairs go, and especially where the stairs aren't going to go that you can see later on. So like the part I'm working on there, that's where the stair sits. So it doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but it has to be flat enough that your glue touches. Now my stencil, I have my hole drawn or cut in there also, so I can just circle my hole. I want to hit the middle of that when I drill it out. Put a couple more pieces of tape to keep this stable because I'm going to drill through both pieces at the same time. If you're measuring this out, it is 5¼ inches across and 6¼ inches down from the top. That's how I got my center point for my pivot. Now that will change if you're doing a different size runner, but in this case, that's where you want to be at. Now again, I'm pushing through here. Since this is pine, it's a lot softer. You want to make sure you don't go too fast and blow a hole out the other side. Bring the bit up and clean it off every now and then if you get pieces of dirt or pieces of wood that don't eject on there. And I've got a really sharp bit. It's a pretty new bit. But again, I'm going through here slow. Once I know I'm almost at the other side, I go super slow to avoid blowing the other side out. Now you can put a piece of tape on the other side, or you can pull this back off, try to flip it over and punch through. I don't like doing that personally because you can get your hole off a little bit. And since we're going to put a dowel rod through here and use it for a pivot, I really don't want it to be wobbly. So you can do this if you want to. You don't have to do this, but I'm going to take mine over and I'm going to round off the edges on it just so it's a little bit smoother. I think it looks a little bit better, plus it keeps you from catching a toe or something on there. Now I'm not doing the flat parts where the stairs go. I'm only doing the front edges of it and the back edge of it. Sorry, I got the camera at a bad angle there. I'm doing the steps now. Same thing. I'm just putting I'm using a 1/4 inch round over here, or I'm sorry, a 3/8 inch round over. You could use 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch, 1/2 inch. Again, you don't have to round these over if you don't want to at all. It's just what I prefer to do on mine. And then I've got my pieces for my inner part. These are my E's. I'm going to round off one side on 2 of these and both sides on 2 of these. So these are my inner supports. Now I want the ones with the 2 roundovers on the back side. That's the part you're going to see when you flip it over. The parts that are flat will be the top supports for the steps themselves. Now when you put these in, since we've rounded them over, we want to make sure we raise that up a little bit. We're not going to glue them flat to the bottom, even though it looks like I'm doing that. There's a little spacer that'll be underneath there. So there'll actually be a little gap so we're not flat on the bottom with our round over edges on there. Now I'm taking a square, as you can see, I'm pushing the square up against the right-hand side or the left-hand side, depending on which way you're looking at it. And I'm making sure that my stairs are square on the side and on the back when I glue these in. If you get this crooked, you'll have a big problem at the bottom and your steps won't fit flush on the floor when you get done. So I'm making a couple marks on those and I'm just going to put these in place. And again, I'm going to put a small spacer under there. I don't think I showed it on the video. The clamp, I'm just tightening up lightly. And I'm checking the back. I've rolled it up on the back and I rolled it up on the feet just to make sure they were still fitting flush before I tighten everything up. And again, before I tighten everything up, there'll be a couple spacers. I'll push it up. And now that I'm thinking of it, I don't know that I show you that or not. Getting kind of warm out here in the garage, so I probably forgot to show that on the camera. But again, once I get everything in place, I get it all snugged up. It's not super tight. It's just tight enough that the pieces won't move. When I flip it over there, right there, that spot that I went through at 5,000 miles an hour was the point where I actually checked it and made sure I had a gap there. And I didn't have my roundovers sticking past the edges. So here I'm just going to piece it back together again. I'm going to make my A-frames. I'm going to measure up 3 3/4 inches on both sides, make a couple pencil marks, and then I'm going to actually use a different method than I normally do here. I use a mortise and tenon a lot of times on these. In this case, we're going to put some pocket screws in it. Now the smaller pieces are hard to hit the centers on, so take your time, make sure you get them in there. You can't really draw a pencil line up these. And since they're at a 5-degree angle, it also makes it a little harder since they tip sideways when you put them in there. If you wanted, you can make a little 5-degree wedge and make them flat, but after a little practice, you'll get it. The biggest thing is when you put the plugs in these, when you go to cover them up, the plugs don't always fit in there perfectly. If you're a patient person, you can put the left side in or the right side in. Wait till they dry, cut them off, and put the other side in. They fit a lot easier. If you're impatient like me, you'll see here in a second, I just kind of force them all in, take a hammer, and smash them down, then cut them all off at one time. So I'm just putting some glue on here. I'm getting the glue tacky. And I'm going to put these in place. I'm not going to tighten them down yet. I want the glue to kind of set a little bit, not long, 2 or 3 minutes, just enough to where they won't slide around on me as much. Since again, this is a 5-degree angle, you could put 5-degree back sloping wedges in there to tighten the clamps up a little bit more. But again, since we're working with pine, I can't super tighten clamp it anyhow because we'll damage the wood. So these just need to be tight enough that when you put the screws in, that it doesn't push the wood away, but not so tight that it warps the wood or creates a bow in it. So once I get these in place, and again the glue gets tacky, I'm going to put a couple clamps on here. Again, clamps aren't going to be super tight. I'll put the top one on first and then put the bottom on, just keep it from moving. Let it sit there for a few seconds and then run my screws in. I run the screws in slow and I keep making sure I push down on the parts to make sure they stay flush with my tabletop. Make sure you're using a flat surface to keep your joints nice and straight, and go super slow when you're starting to make sure it doesn't push away from the wood or it doesn't actually pull your piece up or down and make a bad joint. It's easier to fix right away than it is to go ahead and drive them in and then try to sand it all out later. And make sure you wipe up any excess glue you've got. If you're going to paint your surface, it's not as bad. If you're going to stain it, glue's terrible trying to fix that. The next thing I want to do with these, I'm going to drill my recesses in for my dowel rod. So I've got my T-square set to 8 3/4 of an inch. Again, this will vary depending on the stair radius you have or your stair runners. You can do this, or you can figure out the math by just simply standing these up. If you stand your stair runner up beside of it and make sure they're flush, take a clamp them together and draw a circle where your runner hole is. And that way your stairs will be flush with your legs. And make sure you're in the middle of the wood when you do that also. So 8 3/4 and then halfway through. Now I want my bit to go halfway down into the wood. It's kind of a bad angle here, and I know my bit. My bit is just under a 1/2 inch deep. So the little black line that you can't see very well in there is my stopping point for my 1/2 inch deep. Now this is the plugs I was telling you. If you're patient enough, you only put 2 sides in, wait till they dry, cut them off, put the other 2 sides in, but I just crammed them all together. Now this hasn't dried completely yet. It's probably been an hour maybe since I glued this up. So I'm leaving the clamps on until I get the screws in. Now you can let this sit overnight if you're doing, again, a hardwood project, or if you're trying not to do this in one day. You don't have to drill this right now. I'm just going to do it again because I'm trying to get the video done for you. And it's, again, just a show piece, not a usable piece or a work piece. I'm using 1 1/4 inch screws here. I was going to use these Craig screws, but they didn't bite good enough into the pine, so I went ahead and used deck screws. Same size, 1 1/4 inch. Again, I just didn't like the way those bit in. My pilot bit might be a little bit too big, but once I do that, I'm going to take the clamps off of here, and I'm just going to go ahead and drill the side pieces in. Since that was dried enough, it didn't move any on me at all. Again, I'm doing little pocket or recess pockets in here, and I'm going to fill these up. I think I've got some cherry plugs that'll fit these, so I'm just going to use cherry to fill them up with. Now I've got a CNC machine that I make my own dowels with. If you don't have that luxury, if you get dowels, again, same thing, you can get pine dowels, oak dowels, whatever kind of dowels you want while you're at the box store on your list. Just get a 3/8 inch recess and a 3/8 inch dowel, and it does the same thing. And we're just going to cut all these off, make them nice and flush. Then we're going to sand it out, and then we're going to take this over to the router, and we're just going to round over the outside edges on it. If you want to round the insides also, you can. Normally when you're going around the insides of that A, it creates more of a weird oval shape, so I just normally leave the inside nice and straight, and I just curve the outside edges where you'll be seeing most of it at. Again, that's just personal preference. Now this is not a final sand. I'm just hitting that with like an 80 grit to get all the big stuff off, any glue marks or anything like that. And again, I'm just going to do the outside edges of this. I'm not doing the inside. And make sure you don't round over the corner or round off onto your foot. So you want to stop before you get to that point. Back to our runner, we're just going to take our saw here and we're going to cut off our pegs. And then we're going to sand them down again. I'm going to hit them with an 80 grit just to knock the rough edges off of it. And then we're going to go over everything with a 120 to finish it up. Now I will sand everything with a 120 before I glue it together. It's just a whole lot easier to do that now. There still may be some things you need to touch up later, but much easier to hit now than trying to do it afterwards. Now I'm just doing a rough assembly here, making sure everything fits good. My dowel rod, I want to make sure it fits in there right. And my 12.5-inch pieces still fit. If I have to make my holes a little deeper, I can on my dowel, or I can cut the dowel off a little bit. But we want everything to fit nice and tight there, which it does. And just throwing everything together to make sure I've got all the pieces that I need and everything looks the way I want it to. Again, we're down to our 120 grit, and we're just going to go over all the pieces now as best as we can. If you want to do a 220 or something thinner, you can. 120 does perfectly fine for what I'm doing with it. Now I've got this going at 1,000 speed here, so you can tell it took a while to get it sanded, but again, sand it now is easier than sanding after it's together. While you're waiting on me to sand, you can always click on that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. And once again, I'm just going to fit everything back together, make sure there's nothing I missed, make sure there's no glue spots or anything like that that I didn't see when I was sanding, and make sure I've got all my pieces. So the first part's kind of the important one, that's getting the dowel in. I always do the dowel first because you can slide the other pieces up, down, left, right, but you can't really do the dowel since we're countersinking it. Now you can do this however you want. I usually put glue in the hole and on the peg. I don't want it running down my board, but I want enough glue on there that it fits nice and snug. If your dowel hole doesn't fit in there nice and tight, make sure you put a little extra glue in it so it stays in place. Now we've got a good 5 minutes before that dries or starts to dry where you can't move it. So I'm going to go ahead and put this front piece in first underneath of the dowel. Now this will let me put one clamp across there, and it'll actually hold the bottom piece in, and it will hold the dowel in place. Now since I'm doing this by myself, I'm just putting my square there. If you got a helper, they can hold it in place while you're tightening it down, but I'm just going to put my square down there. Again, put some glue on here. I'm going to use the square to match my sides. Since it's clamped to the bottom of those, when I put it on place, it'll sit the same height as the other ones. I don't have to worry about measuring the height. I've just got to worry about the depth of it. And again, that's just personal preference, how deep you want it. There's not really, I usually try to put it in the middle of the wood because we're going to put screws in here later, so it's easier to try to get them all in the same spot. So when you measure in 3/4 of an inch or 1 inch, and then you can put your screws in later. Again, pull that apart really slowly. If you pull too fast, since nothing's clamped yet, you're going to pull the dowel out and it's going to fall down like a tower on you, which I've done that before. Luckily, I didn't do it in this video, but it has fallen apart on me in the past. Once you get that lined up where you want, this is the hardest one to do, and I'm trying to stay out of the camera a little bit, so I'm making it look a lot harder than it is. But once you get it lined up, grab you a clamp, and again, just put the clamp in between the dowel rod and that. Put it more towards the bottom part or the top part of the support, and then you see the back part kind of open up a little bit more. Now the clamp is not super tight. It's in there tight enough to keep my piece from falling apart. But if I pull it too tight, as you saw the back of it flexing in, I won't be able to get the back piece in. So I'm working kind of quickly here. I'm not going to go super fast, but again, if something moves or if I need to move something, I can move it now versus later. Now I'm also watching my legs. I didn't really show it in the video since I'm trying to put it together, that all 4 of my legs are touching, and on my step in the front, my 2 feet are touching also. Make sure all the pieces are touching at the same time, because if not, it's really easy to get one leg cocked up in the air, or you get it cocked off a little bit sideways, and what will happen is you will end up with a crooked stool. You'll step on the bottom step and the whole thing will move on you. So again, watch your feet, make sure everything stays nice and steady and square. There's 2 more pieces to put in here. One's at the top to hold the top step up, and the other is in the back to catch the steps when they rotate back. We're not going to do that until after we get the screws in it, just so we can get the steps glued on and we know how much clearance we have to get through there. Now you can't put this piece in the middle. If you put it in the middle, your stairs will hit when they fold up. So this goes to the back, and I'm in about 2.5 inches from the back side. I should have measured it for you on the video, but since I've done this so many times, I just kind of know where they go. Where my seam is, where my leg is, and my support is. I'm just inside that support about 1/4 to 1/2 inch. So again, I forgot to show you in the video, but I pushed down on my bottom step to make sure it didn't raise the back legs up. Sometimes if you get it glued crooked or if your dowel's not perfectly straight, when you push down on the bottom, it will raise the back up, and it's a whole lot easier before everything dries to get it back apart and make any corrections you need to make. And similar to my other piece, I'm just putting the glue on. I'm letting it tack up a little bit so my seat or my steps don't slide around on me. I slid the first one on, made sure it was, I've got a 1/2 inch overhang on both sides, and I slid it all the way to the back where it's touching, and that leaves me about a 3/4 inch overhang on the front. Now I've got a good place to clamp this underneath where my support is, so I'm just clamping these down to my support, and I'm going to check the sides and make sure I've got even glue coming out on both sides of it. If I didn't, I would put some clamps toward the back, but again, these clamps hit perfect and they just push the stairs down to where they need to be. Same thing on the next step up. I'm measuring in 1/2 inch on both sides. I pulled the back to where it's flush with the back of the unit. I should have showed you that, but I didn't. And I'm just checking my measurements on the front to make sure my overhang is 3/4 inches on the front also. Again, there I'm just checking my back, make sure my back's nice and even, and I don't have too much overhang on either side. Now you don't have to death grip these clamps. You just want them on there tight enough that you squish out the glue. Once the glue starts squishing out and all your pieces are touching, stop squeezing. Now for my top step, that's glue has been sitting on there for probably 20 minutes, 30 minutes while I'm assembling the rest of it. I've turned my clamp sideways there so I can just put the glue on and put the top step on, and then I'm going to reset my clamp in place. That front piece I put in was just a support to keep my front from bowing in when I put that other clamp on there. Once I get the top lined up and in place, I'm going to go ahead and put some clamps on there. I'm going to clamp this board across the middle of the bottom and wipe off any squish out. And then I'm going to reposition that clamp on the side to put pressure back on here. And this is the piece we're going to put in last. Again, we're going to cut an angle on that, probably a 30-degree slope on it, and put it in after we get all the screws in it. Now one other thing you can do if you want to make it a little more decoration, you can cut a couple more side pieces in here if you wanted to match the back of it, completely optional. So since I started this a little bit later in the day yesterday, I went ahead and let it sit overnight. I've taken all the clamps off and we're going to put some screws in it now, and we're going to put the stop in for the steps. So that way when we roll the steps back, they don't fall all the way back in. We want them to stop where they're almost straight up and down. So I'm just going to take my last board and I'm going to put it in here, and I'm not going to glue it in yet. I'm just going to put it in place and set my steps to where I want them at. Then I'll take a pencil and we'll mark on there how high I want it to be, and that way when I go over and cut an angle on it, when I come back I can pop it right in place. Now you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I like to put like a 30-degree angle on this, and that will allow the seat to come back, and see how it sits on there. We're not hitting a rough or flat edge and creating a dent in the step. That 30-degree angle, 40-degree angle will keep it from damaging the step, so it'll sit on it nice and flat. Now I'm not going to cut the entire board at 30 degrees. I'm just going to cut half of the board width through at 30 degrees. I'm also making sure when I rotate that up, it does not hit the step on the way up or down either way. So back over to the table saw. Like I said, I've got mine set to 30 degrees. You can change it a little bit if you want to. I've not really measured that. You can get technical if you wanted and get in there and figure the exact angle. 30 degrees just seems to work pretty good for me. And as you can see there, I'm only taking off half of the thickness of the board, or roughly half the thickness of the board. So one last test fit just to make sure my angle's good. Again, you can correct that here if you want. And I'm just going to put a couple clamps on the bottom of this. That way when I pull the piece out, I don't have to try to reposition or line my pencil marks back up. I'll still double check them, but I should be able to just sit this back in right on top of my clamps, glue it in place, and clamp it down. Now, like the other clamps on the Pine, I'm not over clamping this. I'm just pulling it into where it's snug and it won't fall out of place. And while this is drying, I'm going to go ahead over to the steps. I'm going to go ahead and start marking my drill marks for my screw. Now it's hard to see down there, but I'm making my lines at 1 inch. So I'm just drawing a 1 inch line down through here. And I'm going to space my screws out evenly. I want 2 screws in each step. Again, we've got a support going across the middle. If you feel like it, you could put 1 or 2 screws down through there. But since we're glued in place also, I think for the most part, 4 screws in the step is more than enough to hold it in place. So I'm measuring in again 1 inch, and I'm going to measure up 2 inches from the front and 2 inches from the back. Now my top's going to be a little bit different. I've got to make sure that I don't hit my pocket screws down below. You got to remember, if you did pocket screws, to watch for them. So my middle of my board I know is clear because I've just got that straight piece going across there, and my pocket screws are coming from the inside to the outside. So once I get done marking my middle point, I'm going to look underneath there, verify where my screws are, and find a place to put the screws going down through where they don't hit the screws that are coming from the sides. And most likely about on the corner. So my screws are coming in here. Again, I used 1¼ inch screws. So I know if I come to the outside edge here, I should be clear and I shouldn't hit it. And by doing it this way, I know I'm far enough towards the middle of the rails on the sides that I won't hit the screws, but I'm still hitting the center of the wood, and it should get a good holding point. Once I've got all my stairs marked, we're going to countersink some holes in here, and we're going to run some screws into it. I'm going to use an 1½ inch screw going down into this. I want a little bit more length to it than what I had on my side supports, just so I could dig into the wood better, get a little bit more support. And I'm using a deck screw here. You can use whatever type of screws you need. If you're using interior, you can use the pocket hole screws. I just find the deck hole screws bite a little bit better into the pine. And you want to make sure that you don't push these in too hard. If you're using an impact like I am, I've used an impact for probably 20 years. And I'm pretty good with the trigger, but if you slip, you're going to blow this right through the pine and you're going to have a mess on your hands. You're going to be redoing a piece over again. So just be careful to not overdrive your screws in here. You just want them to the point where they stop. Once I get all the steps done, I'm going to flip it over on the side, do the screw holes for the side, and then I'll flip it over and do the other side. Basically just make sure when you do these you measure and you hit the center of your boards. You can do 1 screw, 2 screws. I like to do 2 in the sides of these and 1 in the top. So there'll be 2 at the bottom and 1 at the top just because there's more support on the top. We've already got 3 screws coming down from the top, and we've got 4 screws in the support piece. So the top piece really doesn't need a whole lot more screws. It probably doesn't even need this one, but I put it in here anyhow. And if I'm doing a hardwood project and I'm putting a lot of weight on, I'll actually put 2 in there. And these bottom ones, since we're going up at an angle, in my case, the top part is at 1/2 inch deep. The bottom part's at 3/4 inch deep. Since we're going to plug these, it won't really matter if you're not plugging them, or if you wanted a little bit more precise, if your plugs are going to be a different color, you can kind of split the difference. Just make sure your screws hit deep enough in the wood that you don't split the wood when you run the screws in. After that, I'm just going to go around and fill the holes up and put little plugs in there. You can use button tops if you want. You can use plugs. You can use different colored plugs. Again, since this is going to get painted, I'm just using whatever I had. I think I had cherry the first time I grabbed. This time I think I grabbed maple, just because I've got them made up already. And I'm just going to take a quick second to wipe off any glue that may have dripped out or squished out of the holes. Go ahead and cut off our excess here, and then we'll get the sander out and we'll do some sanding and flush them all out. Now, since we're getting close to the end here, make sure when you're sanding this, it's pine, it will dig pretty easy. So I'm using a 120 right now just to get the pegs flushed out. I'm putting the nose into it a little bit, which you're not really supposed to do, but I'm really careful about what I'm doing. And once I get the pegs fairly close to flush, I'm flattening it out so I'm sanding the entire surface. So don't just take the nose of the sander and butt it down in there and grind it out. You'll end up with a dent in your wood. And entirely up to you if you want to. You can go back with a 220 if you want to tighten it up a little bit more. Again, I'm painting this, so I'm just going to do a 120 and put the paint on over top of it. Should be perfectly fine. And it's the moment of truth to see whether I make it to fail army or not. And I'm going to put 220 pounds on a pine stool. First step's good. Second step good. And the final step, no fail army for me. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please click on like, subscribe, and drop a comment down below. Let me know if you liked the video or not.